5 points to consider about nuclear weapons.
5.
Trinity onwards. There was a time when nuclear weapons were but theories and the pipe dreams of physicists, but the pressure of war made the United States decide that they needed them to become a reality. In 1938, German chemists Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann unlocked the secrets of nuclear fission, and the concept of a nuclear bomb ceased to be science fiction and became a scientific feasibility. Following warnings from emigrating European scientists fleeing the rise of fascism, the U.S., with the support of the U.K. and Canada, started the Manhattan Project. Eventually, the project moved towards the Trinity test, which was the product of years of research and was to be the first nuclear detonation in human history. After waiting for rain and some poetically appropriate lightning to clear the test site in New Mexico, the Trinity bomb, nicknamed the Gadget, was detonated at 5:29 a.m. local time on June 16, 1945, propelling humanity into the nuclear age. With the test a success, the use of atomic bombs against the still furiously combatant Imperial Japan was approved. The first bomb deployed against Japan was codenamed Little Boy and used an as-then untested detonation method that involved firing uranium bullets down an internal barrel into a cylinder of uranium. Little Boy made history, being detonated over the Japanese city of Hiroshima on August 6, 1945 at 8:15 a.m., having been dropped by the B-29 bomber Enola Gay. The city of Kokura was designated as the second atomic bomb target, but on the 9th of August, when the bombing raid went ahead, smoke from fire bombings the night before obscured the city, and the bombers were forced to head to their backup target, Nagasaki. At 11:01 a.m., the B-29 Boxcar dropped the Fat Man bomb, which was built much the same as the Trinity bomb, using a plutonium core implosion method. Despite President Truman wanting to announce the Trinity's success at the Yalta Conference to the other Allied representatives before the bomb's use against Japan, Joseph Stalin of the USSR was already well aware of Trinity's success. This is because of a spy network that included scientists and Soviet sympathizer Klaus Fuchs, who worked on the Manhattan Project while leaking the information to the USSR. Between 1945 and 1992, the United States officially conducted a total of 1,054 nuclear tests, which is surprisingly high given the destructive, expensive, and secretive nature of nuclear weapons programs.
4.
Size matters. When it comes to nuclear weapons, size really does matter in more ways than you'd expect. It determines a lot more than just how much the explosion can annihilate. In terms of size, the early bombs like Trinity, Fat Man, and Little Boy were actually really rather small. The mushroom cloud produced by the detonation of Trinity reached 7.5 miles high into the sky, which you're probably thinking is pretty damn high, but it is actually tiny by comparison to the blast clouds of the more powerful nuclear bombs. The most powerful nuclear bomb ever detonated was the Russian Tsar bomb, which was detonated on October 30th, 1961 on Severny Island in the Russian Arctic Circle. The blast yielded 50 megatons, while the Trinity only managed 10 kilotons. For those of you who may not be sure, 1 kiloton is equal to the explosive force of 1,000 tons of TNT, and a megaton is equal to 1,000 kilotons. How powerful was that in reality? Well, the 7.5-mile-high mushroom cloud of Trinity would be utterly dwarfed by the Tsar bomb's 40-mile-high mushroom cloud, which reached well past the stratosphere and, at its widest, was 59 miles wide. The bomb's fireball of hot, vaporizing energy was 5 miles across, and the shock wave was so powerful that it broke windows in Norway and Finland and was picked up by seismic sensors as having traveled around the planet at least 3 times. If one of these bombs hit anywhere near Boston, it would devastate a third of Massachusetts, and you'd be lucky if Fenway Park was still around to turn into a post-apocalyptic fortress. The USSR even designed a version of the Tsar bomb that was twice as powerful as the 50-megaton one they tested, but they never tested that one as it would have simply been too damaging to the environment and those anywhere near it. The bomb itself was so big as to be quite impractical, being 8 feet long and weighing 27 tons. It could only be delivered by a modified bomber, so its delivery could likely be intercepted.
3.
Nuclear annihilation. Knowing now just how big nuclear bombs can get, you might be wondering just what this means for humanity's chances of survival in the event of a nuclear war. There are currently estimated to be between 10,000 and 15,000 nuclear weapons in the world today, which means that in a purely numerical sense, humanity's chance of survival is rather good, actually. If, for argument's sake, a nuclear conflict broke out between China and North America, and say both Canada and the US, it would take 422,000 nuclear weapons, about 750 kilotons, to devastate the land completely. However, this calculation is just based on the square mileage of North America and China, and does not account for population densities or distribution. If we redo the math, taking population density and distribution into account, it would only take about 66,666 nukes to cripple the major population centers of North America and China, leaving them in a Mad Max-like state. This fiendishly appropriate number is somewhat scary to think about, given that at the height of the Cold War, there were roughly this number of nukes on standby. A nuclear exchange in 1982 would have well obliterated both the US and Russia. There may be significantly less nukes in the world today, but given the current trend of military posturing and increasing political tensions between major powers, who knows if that number could rise. Then again, there are more people in the world and better defenses against nuclear weapons today, so even all of the world's nukes placed perfectly for maximum effectiveness could still not eradicate humanity in the space of a few hours. In all likelihood, there are plenty of places in the world that would probably escape direct nuclear attack. By nature of not having any current reason to be a nuclear target, most of the continents of Africa and South America would escape the devastation, aided partially by their spread-out populations. The aftermath of a large nuclear exchange is an entirely different kettle of radioactive fish with regards to survivability, and would be largely dependent on the strength of the bombs used. One outcome would likely be the sort you'd see in post-apocalyptic fiction. The other would be a nuclear winter, both of which have some interesting ramifications with regard to the chances of humanity's survival.
2.
The pop culture apocalypse. Cockroaches, bottle caps, and people wearing rags over tattered bondage gear are the sorts of things pop culture has taught us will survive a nuclear war. By all estimation, humanity might actually come off a little better than what a lot of the movies show, though this is still debated. Some scientists believe that even a relatively small, concentrated nuclear exchange using little boy-strength bombs could be enough to trigger a nuclear winter, but the initial blasts of a global exchange of weapons with less than a megaton yield would not be enough to kill everyone or destroy all human infrastructure. This means shelter would be available in the ruins, with a very real possibility for humanity to rebuild, assuming we avoid areas of concentrated radiation. There would be a lot of radiation, and it would be a real problem. If, for example, an 800 kiloton Russian Topol bomb, the kind kept today in their arsenal, were to hit downtown Los Angeles at close to ground level, not only would swaths of the city be vaporized, but the radioactive fallout would likely be carried by the winds to as far away as Las Vegas. Of that fallout, over 300 square kilometers would likely irradiate at a rate of 100 rads per hour, which would be enough to cause radiation sickness within an hour and increase the risk of cancer by 5% with each passing hour. 10 hours in this fallout zone would be enough to leave a person with agonizing illness, and they'd be dead within a week. This obviously poses a major problem for all would-be post-apocalyptic settlements. Though the fallout would eventually clear, many food supplies, crops, and building materials would remain irradiated. It's this sort of fallout that science fiction tells us will give us nuclear mutants to make life even more hellish for humanity's survivors. But it's more likely that these mutants in reality would be malformed and cancerous as opposed to giant, super strong, and wanting to eat people. The sorts of sci-fi mutations seen in fiction would cause nuclear-influenced evolution to occur over hundreds of years, assuming these mutations are not negative, which they likely would be. A nuclear post-apocalyptic situation akin to those in pop culture is therefore possible, but it requires the use of mostly lower-yield bombs that vaporize less and are spread farther apart in their usage. The smaller-sized mushroom clouds would also have a serious effect, blasting the concentrated radioactive debris into the winds and clouds, creating those deadly fallout zones. When the mushroom clouds reach high into the atmosphere, that's when the chances of the other outcome of a nuclear holocaust increase.
1.
Nuclear winter. All this talk of fiery explosions may almost make you wish for a nuclear winter. Believe us, you don't want one, and fiery explosions would ironically be one of the main factors in causing them. So what exactly is a nuclear winter? It's basically when the fires of all those burning buildings produce enough smoke that the atmosphere gets clogged up so much that the amount of sunlight reaching the surface of Earth is severely reduced, creating an artificial winter. One of the main problems is that these nuclear winters would last an awfully long time. These drops in temperature would trigger extreme weather and increase the risk of death by exposure, which is bad enough given that a lot of shelter would have been nuked away and there would already be the risk of radiation exposure. What's worse is that this sudden temperature drop would almost certainly cause famine, as many crops would simply fail in sudden cold and a lot of cattle would die. In 2013, it was predicted that a nuclear winter-caused famine would lead to the deaths of 2 billion people worldwide. Earlier, we mentioned that places like Africa would likely avoid a direct nuclear exchange, but if the aftermath were a nuclear winter, then the continent's already struggling rural populations would be finished. The mass use of weapons with explosive yields in the megatons would likely cause an especially bad nuclear winter, because they'd destroy so much in the fireball alone, they'd be throwing a lot of radioactive debris into the atmosphere, and given that a weapon like the Tsar bomb can create a cloud that reaches well into the mesosphere, this can lead to giving the sun a good blotting out on a global level. On the one hand, though, it means the concentration of deadly radioactive fallout at ground level is less, as so much gets trapped high in the atmosphere. However, nuclear winters are survivable, and they'd have to be particularly bad to cause human extinction. Humanity has survived similar events in the past that were naturally occurring in the form of volcanic winters. These occur in much the same way, only with a volcanic eruption and the ash it spews out taking the place of a nuclear explosion and the resulting fallout. In 1815, Mount Tambora erupted, leading to severe temperature drops in the northern hemisphere the following year, which became known as the Year Without a Summer. After all of this somewhat dark technical information, you might be considering stockpiling food and cola, then retreating to the safety of an underground shelter. But for the time being, you might just be better off browsing the internet and watching some more top 5 videos.